California Senator Dianne Feinstein, chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Thank you very much, Senator, for being with us. Well, your former colleague has left. He's left one difficult job and taken on perhaps a far more difficult job. Here he is traveling around Europe and facing a critical meeting with the Syrian rebels, and they are trying to use whatever leverage they can. Should the president now reconsider the U.S. policy and do something more than non-lethal aid? Should he consider a no-fly zone?
Not necessarily. I think what Kerry is doing is the right thing. He's getting his feet wet. He's fact-finding on the ground. He's touching base with our major allies in Europe, with Turkey, and then going into the Middle East. I think his assessment on the position of Assad is critical. Is Assad willing to accept some negotiations to leave the country? Is Assad going to depart for the Alawite areas and have a kind of concentrated domain there? So what is likely to happen in Syria is important. I'm not one that is for giving heavy arms in the middle of what is effectively a civil war, because I suspect those arms will crop up another day and could well kill Americans. And that worries me a great deal. I have a great deal of faith in Secretary Kerry. He is skilled, he is effective, he's got the standing. In my view, he's the best of the United States.
Let me ask you about a couple of other foreign policy challenges. China, during the last couple of days, we've seen this report last week, a very well-regarded, confirmed report that has actually traced China's cyber attacks back to a military unit in Shanghai, and that is only one part of it, according to all of the experts we've talked to in and outside of government. What should the U.S. do in reaction?
Well, I'm very concerned. I read the Mendiant report. I've also read other reports classified out of intelligence. And I think the Mendiant report, which is now unclassified, it's public, is essentially correct. I think China has to face up to it. I think our government needs to sit down with China forthwith, present the evidence to China, ask China for its investigation, and press. This is going to no good end unless there is some agreement between our two nations and the world community for an agreement which is enforceable. One of these days, there is going to be a huge cyber attack somewhere, and we must prevent that from happening.
And we're not without crises. How about Afghanistan? In the last 24 hours, we've heard from President Karzai saying that U.S. units have to get out of Wardak province within 2 weeks because of what their affiliated Afghan forces have allegedly done. What should the U.S. do about that?
Well, what I just heard is that the reports are not correct. And that the military is investigating. So I'd sort of like to hold my fire and wait and see what actually is correct and not correct.
Let me just ask you, your information that those reports were not correct, are those from official sources? In other words, have you been briefed on this?
From my intelligence staff. That's the source.
That's understood. That's exactly why I wanted to talk to you about it. And finally, guns. We've been waiting on multiple fronts for some action. You've been a leader on this issue against gun violence. We are hearing, at least from the other side, from people working in a bipartisan way on the Republican side, that we're not close to an agreement on a bipartisan approach. And here the National Rifle Association's Wayne LaPierre over the weekend out west was really going after you personally. Let me play that.
I've been amazed, just amazed at how rapidly this debate deteriorated from what is proven to work to what is proven to be the political agenda of those bent on attacking the Second Amendment to our Constitution. Dianne Feinstein herself commented that she's had her gun ban legislation in her desk for over a year, waiting for the right time to introduce it.
What would you like to say back to Wayne LaPierre?
What I said is that we have been working on this for a year. It's a rather complicated piece of legislation because it exempts 2,200 hunting, sporting weapons by make and model. And that took some work of staff in consultation with real gun experts to be sure that we could be correct on all counts. So it wasn't a bill just quickly slapped together. It had some thoughtful consideration. We have a hearing coming up Wednesday. We have a number of witnesses. I think we will make the case that this is constitutional. I think we will make the case that these weapons do not belong on the streets of our cities, that many of the parts of these weapons make them into weapons that are specifically designed to kill large numbers of people in close conflict. I don't really expect to agree with much that Mr. LaPierre says. Of course, he has the right to say it, and I have the right to do this. I've tried to do it carefully. We have 22 co-sponsors. I recognize it's an uphill battle, but I also know that these events are going to continue, and America has to step up. The mothers, the women, the men of America have to make a decision as to whether their personal pleasure is more important than the general welfare. Grievance killers look for these weapons. These weapons are easy to obtain. There are no background checks. You can buy them out of the back of a car, at a gun show. America's laws are virtually non-existent, and therefore I think this is a good bill. I intend to fight. I did it once before. If it doesn't get done right now, be assured I will continue to press the case.
Senator, do you think you're getting enough support from the White House on this, or are they beginning to think that they can maybe try for background checks but not to try for the assault weapon ban because it is that much tougher?
Well, it might surprise you, Andrea. Our support is very broad. The White House has been very good. They've been very clear. I think we've got all the police. We have all the mayors virtually, the Conference of Mayors, Mayors Against Guns. We have medical experts. We have virtually dozens of religious organizations of every creed supporting us. We have just list and list. I put together a little booklet that contains the basics on the bill, as well as a list of the endorsers. So we will be making our arguments. It's very difficult to go against the NRA because it's volatile. They assault one. We are making our arguments, and I hope America will stand up and say just one thing: enough is enough.
Senator Dianne Feinstein, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Always good to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.